Okay, imagine a law, right? One that's trying to protect really fundamental things like your right to life, your right to feel secure, especially when society is facing, well, a lot of violent crime. It's a tough balancing act. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into South Africa's Firearms Control Act 60 of 2000, often just called the FCA. What we want to do for you today is give you a really clear, hopefully engaging look at this key piece of law. It doesn't matter if you're just curious about safety or maybe you're a law student needing the details. We're going to break down its purpose, what it actually says, and how it plays out in the real world. We're working straight from the Act itself, the consolidated version, updated right up to April 14th, 2023. So let's jump in.
All right, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of who can own what and how, let's understand the why. Why did this act come about? What was going on that made it necessary?
Yeah, that's definitely the place to start. The preamble, the introduction to the act, it really sets the scene. It kicks off by talking about everyone's constitutional right to life and security. And importantly, it says that includes freedom from all kinds of violence, doesn't matter if it's from the state or private individuals.
Okay.
And then it makes this direct link. It points to the increased availability and abuse of firearms and ammunition as a major factor behind the high levels of violent crime. So you can see it's not just legal theory, it's a direct response to a serious real-world problem.
Right, so it's grounded in that reality.
Exactly. And it underlines the government's duty, the state's responsibility, to actively respect, protect, promote, and fulfill those rights in the Bill of Rights. Basically, protecting people from violence is part of the state's core job.
That really frames it differently, doesn't it? It's not just rules about guns, it's about protecting people. So, based on that foundation, what are the specific goals the Act itself spells out?
Good question. Section 2 lays out the purposes pretty clearly. Number 1 is to enhance those constitutional rights, life, safety. Then it's about prevention. Stopping illegal guns from spreading and having better control over the legal ones.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it allows the state to, take illegal firearms out of circulation, control the supply chain, possession, storage, how they're transferred, how they're used. The big picture goal is to set up a really comprehensive and effective system for managing firearms, making sure it's monitored properly and actually enforced. It's trying to cover all the bases, really.
Okay, a very holistic approach then. So let's get down to the brass tacks. When the Act uses the word firearm, what exactly does that mean? I bet the definition is super specific. And just as important, what doesn't count as a firearm under this law?
You're absolutely right. Definitions are key in law. Section 1 defines firearm fairly broadly, but with technical specifics. Basically, it's any device made to shoot a projectile using burning propellant like gunpowder. That's what most people think of.
Right, a typical gun.
Exactly. But there's the key technical bit. Its muzzle energy has to be more than 8 joules. That's the force it has leaving the barrel. This helps separate potentially lethal weapons from, say, some powerful air guns or tools. It also covers devices using specific ammo types, like rimfire or centerfire.
Okay, that 8 joule number is important then.
It is. And even if something can be readily altered to fire, it counts. Plus, some powerful compressed gas devices, specific air guns over 5.6 millimeter caliber, or exceeding that 8 joule limit, they're included too. Critically, it's not just the whole gun. Major parts like the barrel, the frame, or the receiver are legally considered firearms themselves.
Wow, okay, so parts count too. What about the exclusions then? What's definitely not covered?
Right, Section 5 lists things specifically excluded. This matters a lot practically. Like explosive power tools used in construction, they're out. Muzzle loaders, the old-style guns you load from the front, they're excluded from this main definition, although they have their own specific rules, usually needing a competency certificate anyway. Also, most air guns, pellet guns, tranquilizer guns used by vets, paintball markers, flare guns. Those are generally not firearms under this act, and neither are deactivated firearms guns permanently made unable to fire. Knowing these distinctions is vital because it tells you what falls under the Act's strict licensing regime and what doesn't.
That clarifies things a lot. So the Act defines what a firearm is. Does it get into the details of how they work? Like the difference between fully automatic and semi-automatic. We hear those terms a lot.
Absolutely. And that distinction is crucial in the Act. Fully automatic is pretty straightforward. Pulls the trigger once, multiple shots fire. Think machine guns. Semi-automatic, on the other hand, is self-loading. It chambers the next round automatically, but it only fires one shot each time you pull the trigger. You have to pull it again for the next shot. This difference is huge because fully automatic weapons are generally prohibited for civilians under the Act. They're seen as military grade.
Right. That makes sense from a safety perspective. Okay, so shifting focus to individuals. For most people wanting to own a firearm legally, there's a process. It seems like there's a really crucial first step, even before you think about a license. What is that?
Yes, absolutely critical first step. Section 3 is crystal clear. You simply cannot possess a firearm without a proper license, permit, or authorization.
Mm-hmm.
And the gatekeepers to even applying for one of those is the competency certificate. You have to get that first.
Gateway, okay.
Exactly. Chapter 5, especially sections 9 and 10, deals with this. To get one, you generally need to be 21 or older. There are some exceptions, maybe for business needs or if you're a really serious, like dedicated hunter or sport shooter, but 21 is the baseline. You also have to be a South African citizen or a permanent resident. And then there's this big one. You have to be considered a fit and proper person. It sounds a bit vague, but it's crucial. It means things like being mentally stable, not being dependent on alcohol or drugs, and having a clean record regarding certain crimes. We're talking violence, domestic violence, sexual offenses, serious drug crimes, even past negligence with firearms.
So it's a character assessment, too.
Very much so. On top of that, you physically have to pass test theory, practical to show you know the law, and can handle a firearm safely and efficiently. It's designed to be a thorough check before you even get to the licensing stage.
That sounds incredibly thorough, establishing that baseline responsibility. So once you've cleared that hurdle, you've got your competency certificate, then you apply for a license. Is it just one type of license, or are there different kinds depending on why you want the firearm?
That's a really important distinction the Act makes. It's not a one-size-fits-all license. The type of license and the conditions attached to it are directly linked to your stated purpose for having the firearm. Section 11 actually says the registrar has to issue a separate license for every single firearm. No bulk deals here.
One gun, one license. Got it.
Precisely. So let's look at some types. If your reason is self-defense, under Section 13, it's very restricted. You're generally limited to just one license, usually for a handgun or a basic shotgun, not automatic ones. And you have to prove that, well, other ways of protecting yourself just aren't adequate.
A high bar, then.
A very high bar. And if you wanted what's called a restricted firearm for self-defense, maybe a semi-automatic rifle, but one that can't be easily made fully automatic, that's Section 14. Again, usually limited to one, and you'd have to show why the basic Section 13 firearms isn't enough. The Act really limits firearms purely for self-defense.
Okay. What about other reasons like hunting or sports?
Right, that's different. If you're an occasional hunter or sports shooter, Section 15, you can get licenses for non-automatic handguns, rifles, or shotguns. But there are limits, usually a maximum of 4 firearms in total, and maybe fewer if you already have that self-defense license.
So there are taps.
Yes. But if you qualify as a dedicated hunter or dedicated sports shooter under Section 16, meaning you're a paid-up member of an accredited club or association, and you actively participate, then things change. You can generally get licenses for a wider range of firearm types, and crucially, there's no set limit on the number you can own. The thinking is that dedicated members are under more scrutiny and have proven commitment. The same logic applied to professional hunters under Section 16A.
Interesting. So more involvement means potentially more access?
In a regulated way, yes. Then you have special categories like private or public collections, Section 1719. This can allow owning even prohibited firearms, but usually they must be deactivated or kept under extremely strict conditions for display only, requiring accreditation. And finally, business purposes licenses. Section 20 covers security companies, firearm trainers, film sets needing props, game ranchers managing wildlife, and so on. Again, specific conditions and accreditation apply. The key theme is matching the license type and firearm to the stated use and the perceived risk. And remember, Section 24 says all these licenses need renewing. Typically, you apply 90 days before they expire.
That tiered system makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've covered individuals pretty well, but what about the businesses involved? The dealers, the manufacturers, gunsmiths? How does the Act regulate that whole commercial side?
That's a huge part of the control mechanism, trying to track firearms from the very beginning and stop them leaking into illegal markets. Chapter 7 sets up the rules for these businesses. Put simply, you can't trade in firearms, Section 31 dealers, manufacture them, Section 45 manufacturers, or do certain gunsmithing work, Section 59 gunsmiths, without the right license.
Standard licensing, okay.
Yes, and like individuals, they need to meet fit and proper standards, operate from approved locations, and follow strict license conditions. But the really interesting part, I think, is the record keeping. Licensed dealers, manufacturers, gunsmiths, they have to keep incredibly detailed registers. They need databases linked up to the central police system, and they have to regularly report their transactions.
So it's all about traceability.
Exactly. The Act is really trying to create a paper trail, or rather a digital trail, for every legal firearm from the moment it's made or imported, through every sale or repair, right up until it's potentially destroyed or exported. It's fundamental to controlling the legal supply.
That makes total sense. Trying to close the gaps. Now, owning a firearm, whether you're an individual or a business, obviously comes with big responsibilities day to day. What does the Act say about simple things like storing it safely or transporting it or even carrying it in public?
The responsibility doesn't stop once you have the license. Definitely not. Chapter 9 is key here. Section 83 is very direct. Firearms and ammo must be stored and transported in the prescribed manner. This means specific regulations usually requiring an approved safe bolted down, often storing firearms and ammunition separately, all designed to prevent theft or kids getting access.
Okay, secure storage is paramount. What about taking it outside?
Section 84 covers carrying in public. If it's a handgun, it generally has to be in a holster on your body where it may be secured in something like a backpack. Other types of firearms need to be in a proper gun bag or case. The key requirements are that the firearm must be completely covered, so not visible, and you have to be able to exercise effective control over it at all times. It's about responsible handling and minimizing public alarm or risk.
Right, common sense rules, basically. So we have rules for responsible behavior. But what happens when someone breaks those rules? Or if they're just not suitable to own a firearm anymore? What are the red flags and how serious are the consequences if someone is declared unfit?
That's the ultimate fallback, the safety net. Chapter 12 deals with declaring someone unfit to possess a firearm. There are basically two ways this happens. First, the registrar, the official in charge of the Central Firearms Register, can declare you unfit under Section 102.
On what grounds?
Several grounds. If there's a domestic violence protection order against you, for example, or if you've threatened to harm yourself or someone else, if you have a mental health condition that makes possession unsafe or show a propensity for violence or are dependent on substances like alcohol or drugs, even things like repeatedly failing to store your gun safely or lying on your application can lead to it.
Okay, so the registrar has significant power there.
Yes. The second way is via the courts under Section 103. If you're convicted of certain really serious crimes, unlawful gun possession or use, negligent handling causing injury, serious violent crimes, sexual abuse, drug dealing, terrorism, things like that, the court generally must declare you unfit automatically unless there are truly exceptional reasons not to. For other serious crimes listed in the Act, the court has to hold an inquiry specifically to decide if you're unfit.
And what happens if you are declared unfit?
The consequences are immediate and total, according to Section 104. All your competency certificates, licenses, permits, everything related to firearms become instantly invalid, gone. Practically, you have just 24 hours to surrender all your firearms and ammunition to the police.
Wow, 24 hours.
Yes. Then you have 60 days to arrange for a licensed dealer to sell them for you, or the registrar decides how they're disposed of. If you don't act, they're forfeited to the state. It's a complete removal of your ability to legally own firearms. And besides being declared unfit, Chapter 16 lists specific criminal offenses. Section 120 gives examples like not reporting a lost gun, using one negligently, handling one unsafely, like while drunk, pointing it at someone without a good reason, firing it in a town. Penalties in Section 121 can be hefty fines or even long prison sentences, depending on the offense. Although interestingly, Section 122 also gives the registrar power to issue administrative fines for some lesser offenses, sort of like a ticket, as an alternative to a full criminal case.
Great, so there's a spectrum of consequences. Okay, we've covered licensing, responsibilities, consequences. Let's look at the bigger picture stuff. What about proactive measures the Act includes to try and improve safety across the board? Things like amnesties or firearm-free zones.
Yeah, those are really important tools in the Act's strategy. Chapter 20 covers them. Section 139 is about firearm amnesties. The minister can declare an amnesty period, usually with parliamentary approval, specifically to reduce the number of illegally possessed firearms.
So a chance for people to hand in illegal guns.
Exactly. If you surrender an illegally held firearm during an official amnesty, you get indemnity from prosecution for possessing it unlawfully. It's a way to get those guns off the street without punishing people who might have inherited them or found them or just want to get right with the law. Sometimes there's even an option during amnesty to apply for a license for the surrendered firearm if it's eligible.
That sounds like a really practical measure. What about firearm-free zones?
That's Section 140. The minister has the power to declare specific places or types of places as firearm-free zones. Think schools, government buildings, maybe hospitals, places where guns really don't belong. If a place is declared a firearm-free zone, then basically no one can carry or even store a firearm or ammunition there unless they have very specific authorization, like on-duty police perhaps.
And how is that enforced?
Well, crucially, the Act gives police specific powers in these zones. They can search people and seize firearms or ammunition without needing a warrant if they have reasonable grounds to suspect someone is violating the firearm-free zone rule. It's a stronger enforcement stance for sensitive areas. Both amnesties and firearm-free zones show the Act trying to actively shape a safer public environment.
Okay, so today we've really unpacked quite a bit of South Africa's Firearms Control Act. We started with the why, those core constitutional rights and the problem of violence. Then we got into the specifics, what counts as a firearm, the whole competency and licensing process for individuals and businesses, the crucial responsibilities like safe storage, and the serious consequences of getting it wrong or being deemed unfit. And finally, those broader safety tools like amnesties and firearm-free zones. It's definitely a complex piece of law trying to cover a lot of ground.
It absolutely is. It's a major attempt to regulate a very difficult area, balancing the rights mentioned in the Constitution with the very real need for public safety in a country that has faced significant challenges with violent crime. And, brings up a continuous question for society, doesn't it? How do we keep adapting laws like this? How do we make sure they stay effective, stay fair as technology changes, as society's needs change? That balance point is never really static, is it?
That's a great point to end on. It's an ongoing conversation. So whether you're deep in legal studies, just interested in how laws shape society, or concerned about community safety, we hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of the FCA. Maybe think about the different parts we discussed, which aspects seem most critical or most challenging. It's a framework that impacts everyone. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.